Imagine coming home after a long business trip, expecting everything to be normal, only to discover that your wife has been living a secret life, one you never saw coming. That's exactly what happened to me. It all started with a simple dinner invite to meet some of her new friends, but the night took a turn I never could have anticipated. What I thought was just casual fun quickly revealed deeper intentions. The satisfaction I thought we both had in our marriage was a lie, and I was left questioning everything. How do you deal with betrayal when the person you trust the most sees it as no big deal? In this story, I'll share how I uncovered the truth and the difficult decisions that followed. It had been another long business trip, the kind that leaves you drained, counting down the days to be back home with someone who makes it all worth it. My wife, Sabrina, had always been understanding of my work commitments, never complaining when I was gone for weeks. I figured everything between us was normal, routine even. She had her friends, her hobbies, and I trusted her completely. But as I walked through the front door this time, something felt off. The house was the same, but there was an almost imperceptible shift in the air. Then she told me, with that familiar smile, about a dinner she had planned for us with new friends. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in hindsight, that was when things started to change. As the evening approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about Sabrina's demeanor. She seemed more eager than usual, as though the dinner was more than just a casual meetup. I hadn't seen her this excited in a while. When I asked about our new friends, and in Cal, her responses were vague, almost evasive, but I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking things. After all, I've been gone a while. What could be more innocent than a simple dinner? Still, I couldn't ignore that nagging sense of curiosity growing within me. What was it about these new friends that made her so energized? As the night of the dinner arrived, I was determined to go in with an open mind. But the minute we walked into Ann and Cal's house, I felt a strange tension simmering beneath the surface. Sabrina seemed entirely at ease, laughing and joking with them like old friends, while I struggled to keep up with the conversation. Something wasn't adding up, and yet I didn't want to jump to conclusions. It wasn't like I had any reason to doubt her, right? Still, that slight feeling of unease lingered, and as I looked at Sabrina, I couldn't help but wonder what else she hadn't told me. As we settled in at the dinner table, the atmosphere was strange, too relaxed, almost like everyone else was in on a secret that I had missed. Sabrina was different that night, more confident, more bold. Her outfit alone caught me off guard. It wasn't something she'd normally wear for a casual dinner. It was provocative, almost too much for the occasion, but she didn't seem to mind the attention it drew. And in Cal, our hosts, exchanged glances that felt intimate, as if they shared an unspoken understanding with Sabrina. I tried to shake off the feeling to just enjoy the evening, but every laugh, every touch, felt loaded with intention. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice how close Sabrina had become with Ann and Cal. The way they spoke to each other, the casual touches that lingered a little too long, it was unsettling. Sabrina, my wife, was acting like she had known them for years. Their conversations flowed easily, full of inside jokes and meaningful looks that I wasn't a part of. Every moment felt charged with something just beneath the surface, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I found myself watching Sabrina more closely, trying to understand what was really happening. But every time I asked, she just smiled, brushing off my questions as if I was imagining things. By the end of dinner, I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that had been building inside me. The way they interacted, it was almost like I was the outsider in my own relationship. And yet, Sabrina seemed so comfortable with them, laughing, leaning in closer with every word. I caught her exchanging a look with, and that was almost conspiratorial. My mind raced, searching for answers, but none of it made sense. I was still trying to piece it all together, but the night was far from over, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. As the night drifted on, the atmosphere in the room shifted from lighthearted to something more intimate, more charged. It wasn't the kind of tension you'd expect from a simple dinner with new friends. The way Sabrina interacted with and Cal became bolder, her laughter louder, her touch more frequent. It felt almost like flirting, but I wasn't sure if that was really what I was seeing, if that was what I wanted to believe. Each glance, each casual brush of the hand seemed to carry a deeper meaning, something I wasn't privy to. And as much as I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that unsettling feeling in my gut only grew stronger. At one point, I excused myself, needing a moment to gather my thoughts, to clear my head. When I returned to the living room, I stopped in my tracks. Sabrina, my wife, was sitting too close to Cal, her hand casually resting on his arm. Wallen looked on, a knowing smile on her lips. It was a scene that seemed to suggest something I didn't want to believe was happening. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing. There was an undeniable tension in the air now, one I could no longer ignore. The casual nature of the evening had dissolved, replaced with something far more intimate, something far more intentional. I watched, my heart pounding, as the three of them moved closer together. Their conversation now whispered, full of laughter that seemed to exclude me entirely. This wasn't just friendly banter anymore. It was something else, something that made my stomach turn. I felt like an intruder in my own life. Standing there, watching Sabrina cross a line I hadn't even realized existed until that moment. I wasn't sure how to react, whether to confront her, to walk away, or to stay and see how far this would go. But I knew, deep down, that this night had changed everything. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The weight of what I was seeing, the way Sabrina was acting, was too much to ignore. I stepped forward, making my presence known, and the room went still for a moment. Sabrina looked up at me, completely unfazed by my obvious discomfort. She didn't flinch, didn't even try to explain. Instead, she smiled, a smile that felt foreign, as if I was looking at a stranger. Then, with a casualness that shocked me, she invited me to join them, as if this had all been part of some unspoken plan I was supposed to understand. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing between disbelief and betrayal. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Join them? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew. How could she be so casual, so nonchalant about something that felt like a complete betrayal? I stammered, trying to find the right words, but all I could manage was a shaky refusal. Sabrina, still unfazed, simply shrugged, as if my refusal didn't matter. She went on to explain, her tone light, almost amused, that this was normal for her now, that she saw it as fun, as something exciting and harmless. But to me, it felt like everything was unraveling right before my eyes. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to understand how we had ended up here. But all I could feel was shock. Shock at her indifference, at the ease with which she dismissed my feelings. She called me rigid, said I was overreacting, that I needed to loosen up. Her words stung, but more than that, they left me feeling isolated, as if I was the one being unreasonable. I couldn't wrap my head around how she had kept this side of her life hidden from me, how she had so easily crossed the line without a second thought. And yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed felt like a blur. I couldn't stop replaying that night in my head, trying to make sense of it all. Sabrina's words haunted me, her casualness, the way she brushed off my shock as if it was nothing. I needed answers, needed to understand how we had gotten here, how I had been so blind. So I started digging, researching this world Sabrina had suddenly thrust upon me. I read articles, watched videos, even joined forums trying to piece together the puzzle. What I found was both disturbing and eye-opening. Swinging, open relationships. It was a lifestyle, a choice for some. But why hadn't I been given a choice? The more I uncovered, the more confused I became. It wasn't just about the act itself. It was about trust, communication, and intention. Those were words that kept coming up. Intention, satisfaction. People claimed that this lifestyle brought them closer together, made their relationship stronger. But all I could feel was betrayal. How could Sabrina be so satisfied with something that left me feeling so hollow? I wasn't opposed to the idea of people living their lives as they wished, but the fact that I had been left out of this decision, it stung. I needed to talk to someone who understood this world, but also understood me. So, I reached out to an old friend, someone I knew had been involved in the swing scene for years. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but I needed perspective. His insight was surprising. He didn't defend Sabrina's actions, but explained that, for many, this lifestyle only works when both partners are fully on board. It's all about boundaries, he said. Boundaries? That word echoed in my mind. Sabrina hadn't just crossed mine. She had bulldozed right through them without a second thought. But now I was left with the question, how do you rebuild those boundaries when they've already been shattered? I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. After days of silence, I confronted Sabrina. I needed to know why she had kept this part of her life hidden, why she had never once mentioned wanting something different. The betrayal I felt went beyond the act itself. It was the lack of communication, the way she had blindsided me. I told her how isolated I felt, how her actions had shattered my trust. But Sabrina, as calm as ever, didn't seem to grasp the weight of it. She defended herself, insisting that I had always known, that she had dropped hints, left clues, and that I had chosen to ignore them. Her words hit me hard, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was rewriting the past. Could she be right? Had I really ignored signs, brushed off subtle comments that pointed to this? I racked my brain, trying to recall moments when she might have hinted at wanting something more, but I came up blank. Sabrina, on the other hand, was adamant. She claimed that this lifestyle had brought her a sense of satisfaction that our marriage hadn't, and that if I had just opened my eyes, I would have seen it coming. But her logic didn't sit right with me. How could she place the blame on me when she had never given me a real choice? As the argument wore on, it became clear that we were standing on opposite sides of a widening chasm. She saw me as the rigid one, the one unwilling to bend, while I felt betrayed, deceived by the person I trusted most. I could feel the emotional distance growing between us, a wall that neither of us seemed willing or able to tear down. The conversation ended without resolution, without any sense of closure. Instead, it left me feeling more alone than ever, unsure of where we stood or what would happen next. But I knew one thing for certain: our marriage wasn't the same anymore. The following week passed in a haze of awkward silence and unresolved tension. I kept hoping Sabrina would come to her senses, that she'd realize how much damage had been done and reconsider. But when she casually mentioned that she was planning to attend another event with Ann and Cal that weekend, it became clear she wasn't planning on changing. She had made her choice. I pleaded with her, asking her to stay home so we could talk, so we could try to save what was left of our marriage. But she brushed me off, her mind already made up. Sabrina seemed more interested in this new life than in the one we had built together. It felt like a final blow, the realization that she had chosen this lifestyle over our relationship. My frustration turned to despair, then to resolve. I couldn't keep living like this, stuck in a marriage where I was nothing more than a bystander. The trust was gone, and with it, any hope of reconciliation. That weekend, while she was out with Ann and Cal, I made the hardest decision of my life. I started the process of filing for divorce. It wasn't out of anger anymore. It was out of necessity. I couldn't hold on to something that was already broken beyond repair. I had to let go, no matter how much it hurt. When she returned home, I handed her the papers, my wedding ring resting on top. Sabrina looked at me in disbelief, as if she hadn't expected me to follow through. She tried to argue, to claim that I was being unreasonable, but I'd already made up my mind. There was no going back now. I had been patient, understanding, and willing to work things out, but she had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. The finality of it settled over me like a weight, but with it came a strange sense of relief. This chapter was closing, but what came next, that was still unknown. In the days that followed, Sabrina was in denial. She called, she texted, she even showed up at the house, trying to convince me that we could still fix things, that this didn't have to be the end. But I knew there was no going back. I had given her every chance, and she had chosen a path that I couldn't follow. It wasn't about being rigid or closed-minded. It was about respect, about trust, and those had been broken beyond repair. I left her a final note, short and to the point. I had started the divorce process, and there was no turning back now. My wedding ring lay next to it, a symbol of everything that had been lost. At first, I thought she would try harder, maybe fight for us. But as the days turned into weeks, Sabrina seemed to accept it. She didn't show up unannounced anymore, and the calls grew less frequent. I'd hear from mutual friends that she was still seeing and in Cal, still living the life she had chosen over our marriage. And while it hurt, it also confirmed what I had known all along. She was never going to change. There was no way to rebuild what had been shattered. The finality of it was like a slow, aching burn, but I knew it was the only way forward. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again. Different, but normal. Then, one day, I found myself at a resort, a place I never imagined I'd be. I was there with someone new, sure, exploring life in a way I hadn't before. We were laughing, enjoying ourselves, when I saw Sabrina across the room. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to say. She approached me, accusing me of hypocrisy, of doing the very thing I had condemned her for. But this was different. This wasn't about betrayal. It was about choice, about healing in a way that made sense for me. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. Months after the divorce, I found myself in a place I never expected, at a resort for swingers of all things. It wasn't planned, just something that happened as I started seeing Sher, a woman who opened my eyes to new experiences. We were there, not because of some secret desire, but because we shared an openness, an understanding that hadn't existed in my marriage. It wasn't about the lifestyle itself. It was about feeling seen, about making choices together. The past had taught me one thing. Satisfaction doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from honesty, from being true to what you need. Then across the room, I saw Sabrina. I froze for a second, unsure of how to react. She looked different, confident, almost defiant. When she walked over, her words were sharp, accusing me of being a hypocrite. How could I be here, of all places, after everything that happened? The irony wasn't lost on me, but this wasn't about betrayal anymore. I wasn't living in someone else's secret world, blindsided by hidden intentions. I had made a choice this time, an informed one. I explained that it wasn't about swinging. It was about moving forward, healing from the wreckage of our marriage in a way that made sense for me. Sabrina stared at me, disbelief in her eyes. I could tell she hadn't expected this. But as she turned to walk away, I felt a strange sense of closure, like a chapter in my life was finally finished. The weight of her accusations, her decisions, it all lifted, leaving me feeling lighter than I had in months. I had moved on, not just from Sabrina, but from the version of myself who had spent so long in the dark. Now, I was living with intention, making choices that were mine, and that, more than anything, was the satisfaction I'd been searching for all along.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.